So, the map of northern air power just changed. For the first time in 75 years, American fighter jets are no longer the backbone of NATO's Arctic defense. A Swedish fighter armed with British missiles is Sweden. Sweden just deployed Gripen fighters to lead NATO's Arctic air policing from Iceland, carrying British-made Meteor missiles that the Pentagon's $2 trillion F-35 program still can't fire. The Gripen costs a quarter of the F-35 to operate, can launch from 800 meters of frozen highway, and just complete today autonomous combat flights that the F-35 hasn't attempted, and the Pentagon's response has been to dispatch senior officials to every Nordic capital with one message: please don't stop buying our fighter. When the world's largest military starts asking allies to keep buying, you know who's winning. Warren Buffett, who has spent 60 years studying how organizations allocate capital, was asked about the F-35 versus Gripen, and what he said about capital allocation at the national level is going to change how you think about defense spending forever, when the world's greatest investor calls a $2 trillion weapons program the worst capital allocation in the history of government. You need to hear why. Finland, Norway, Denmark, the UK, nations that form NATO's entire northern flank, are all deepening their relationship with the Swedish-British Gripen program. Ukraine wants 150 of them. Canada is reconsidering its F-35 order. The order book for Saab just hit an all-time record, and the Pentagon has moved to emergency procurement. Reviews, sweetened F-35 pricing, and rushed Arctic deployments. The institutional behavior of an organization that knows it's losing market share in the most critical theater on Earth. Subscribe now, because this is the story of how a country of 10 million people armed with British technology and German AI is redrawing the map of northern air power, and the Pentagon can't stop it. To understand why this reshaping matters, you need to understand the architecture it's replacing. Because for 75 years, NATO's northern air defense was built around one country's fighters, one country's systems, and one country's control. Since NATO's founding in 1949, the alliance's air power architecture has been designed, built, and led by the United States. American fighters, the F-86, the F-104 Star fighter, the F-16, and now the F-35 have been the standard across allied air forces. American airborne command systems direct the air battle. American tankers provide aerial refueling. American logistics chains provide the spare parts, the software updates, the maintenance expertise, and the technical support that keep allied fighters in the air. For 75 years, if you wanted to defend the Arctic, you bought American, flew American, and maintained American. Your pilots trained on American systems. Your mechanics used American tools. Your software needed American updates. The architecture provided defense. It also provided control, and that control was strategic, not accidental. American fighters bind allies to American logistics chains, American political cycles, and American foreign policy priorities. When Washington decides to slow walk spare parts or delay a software update, allied air forces degrade with no alternative source of support. The F-35 deepened this dependency to unprecedented levels. The jet's autonomous logistics information system phones home to Lockheed Martin servers for software authentication. Without American software authorization, the F-35 cannot fly combat missions. That isn't a design flaw. It's a feature that gives the United States unilateral control over when and whether allied nations can use their own fighters. The F-35 isn't just a fighter jet. It's a subscription service, and the United States controls the terms. Every F-35 operator is a customer who can be turned off. This architecture was acceptable when American leadership was reliable, when alliance commitments were stable, and when American defense procurement delivered working products on reasonable timelines. The F-35 program challenged all three of those assumptions simultaneously. The F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the most expensive weapons program in human history, has a lifetime cost exceeding $2 trillion. That number is not a projection or an estimate. It's the Government Accountability Office's calculation, and it has been revised upward every single time the GAO has looked at it. Sustainment costs alone rose from $1.1 trillion in 2018 to $1.58 trillion in 2020-223, a 44% increase in 5 years. And the Pentagon's response was not to fix the cost problem, but to plan to fly the jets less. Block for modernization, the upgrade package that was supposed to make the F-35 the fighter it was always promised to be, is $6 billion over budget and 5 years behind schedule. The TR-3 hardware and software upgrade is 3 years late. It was supposed to be ready in April 2023, and the Pentagon still doesn't have a firm delivery date. Deliveries were halted entirely for a full year. from July 2023 to July 2024 because jets coming off the production line lacked the software to fly in combat. Dozens of brand new fighters sat in storage at Lockheed's Fort Worth facility, built but unable to perform their basic mission. The Pentagon eventually accepted an interim software version just to avoid the security risk of having a 100 high-value military aircraft parked together in one location. The fleet's mission readiness rates it's at 55%, meaning nearly half the time the most expensive fighter in the world is sitting in a hangar instead of defending airspace. The Pentagon's own target of 65% readiness has never been achieved in the program's history. Pratt & Whitney, the sole engine manufacturer, hasn't delivered a single engine on schedule in the last 2 years, averaging 155 days late per power plant, and the GAO found that the Pentagon has been paying Lockheed Martin hundreds of millions of dollars in performance incentive fees, bonuses designed to reward on-time delivery for jets that were delivered late, bonuses for late work. That's not procurement, that's tribute, and procurement is collapsing from 86 jets purchased in fiscal year 2024 to just 47 in fiscal year 2026. The Air Force requested just 24, half of the prior year's plan. The Chief of Staff of the Air Force said publicly that the service won't resume full F-35 purchases until the fighter is, in his words, most relevant for the fight. That's the head of the Air Force saying on the record that the F-35 is not currently relevant for the fight it was built to win. The F-35 was supposed to be the fighter that cemented American air power dominance for the 21st century. 3,000 jets across 17 nations, all dependent on American systems, all locked into American supply chains. Instead, it gave NATO a reason to look for something else, and what NATO found in a country of 10 million people armed with British technology and designed for the frozen north is reshaping the map of air power across the alliance's most critical theater. Sweden designed the Gripen to fight the Soviet Union, not with American help, not with American planes. On its own, with a population of 10 million and a defense budget a fraction of what Washington spends on catering. The design philosophy was existential. If the Soviets invade, every airbase in Sweden gets destroyed in the first hour of the war. The fighter must operate from dispersed locations, 800 meters of straight road, forest clearings, frozen highway strips, anywhere flat enough to land and short enough to hide. 10-minute turnaround, land, refuel, rearm, relaunch. With a crew of 6 conscripts, not specialized technicians trained for months. Conscripts trained in days, software-defined architecture capability upgrades deployed in days through software updates, not years through hardware retrofits. The engineers at Saab say it plainly, we can change what the Gripen does without changing what it is. The Gripen wasn't designed to win air shows or impress defense analysts. At conferences, it was designed to survive a war against a superpower. Every decision, the dispersed operations, the quick turnaround, the modular software, the low maintenance requirements was made by engineers who expected their country to fight for its survival. And that design philosophy born from Swedish existential pragmatism turns out to be exactly what NATO needs in the Arctic. The cost numbers alone are staggering in their contrast. The Gripen's operating cost runs approximately $8,000 to flight hour. The F-35's runs approximately $33,000 per flight hour. And that figure has been increasing, not decreasing as the fleet ages. For the cost of one F-35 flight hour, you can fly a Gripen 3 to 4 times in a war of attrition, which is what NATO is preparing for in the Arctic. The Air Force that can fly the most sorties from the most locations at the lowest cost wins. Volume and availability beat theoretical superiority every time. The unit acquisition cost tells a similar story. Roughly $85 million for a Gripen E versus approximately $200 million for the life cycle cost of an F-35, when you factor in the sustainment tail. And the Gripen's availability is dramatically higher. While the F-35 fleet manages 55% mission readiness, the Gripen routinely achieves some of the highest operational availability rates in NATO. The numbers don't just favor the Gripen, they devastate the case for the F-35 in any theater where cost, availability, and dispersed operations matter. Which is to say the theater where the actual war is most likely to be fought. The British dimension is what transforms the Gripen from a Swedish national fighter into a European weapons system. The MBDA Meteor missile is the crown jewel, a UK-led 6-nation consortium project that produced what the International Institute for Strategic Studies calls arguably the most capable air-to-air missile currently in service on Western combat aircraft. Ramjet-powered, meaning it generates thrust all the way to the target instead of coasting on momentum like traditional rocket-powered missiles. Speed Mach 4 and above, range over 200 kilometers, the largest no-escape zone of any Western air-to-air missile. Once the meteor is tracking you, the area of sky in which you can't outrun. It is larger than for any competing weapon. The Gripen was the first fighter in the world to launch Meteor, achieving initial operational capability in 2016. The F-35 still hasn't integrated it. Current plans suggest 2027 at the earliest, meaning the $2 trillion fighter cannot fire the missile that the $85 million fighter has carried for a decade. But the British connection goes far deeper than missiles. Martin Baker of the UK provides the ejection seats. British companies supply landing gear, advanced sensors, and countermeasure systems. In November 2025, the UK and Sweden conducted Viking Flame trials at RAF Coningsby, joint next-generation electronic warfare testing using the Gripen as the platform, the UK's Empire test. Pilot School has operated the Gripen since 1999. Giving the UK 25 years of institutional experience with the aircraft, DOID estimated the Gripen program generates between £1.1 and £3.3 billion in British gross economic value. This isn't a Swedish plane with some British spare parts bolted on. This is a Swedish-British weapons system, Swedish airframe, British weapons, British seats, British sensors, British countermeasures tested at. And in May 2025, the Gripen added a capability that no other frontline fighter has demonstrated through Project Beyond, a partnership with German AI firm Helsing. The Gripen E was flown autonomously by artificial intelligence in live beyond visual range combat scenarios, the first known instance of a frontline fighter executing AI-directed combat maneuvers in actual flight. The AI executed complex engagements, provided real-time firing cues, and demonstrated adaptive tactical decision-making. The Gripen's modular software architecture allowed AI integration without compromising safety-critical flight controls, an advantage that rigid systems like the F-35E's tightly coupled software cannot easily replicate. The Gripen E became the first fighter in history flown by artificial intelligence in live combat, not in simulation, not in a Pentagon briefing room. In the air, in February 2026, Sweden deployed Gripens to Iceland to lead NATO's Arctic air policing, the first time in history that Sweden's Skaraborg Airflotilla contributed a fighter unit to a NATO operation. Swedish Gripens were also deployed to Poland in 2025 for NATO's eastern flank enhanced air policing. Joint UK-Sweden air patrols under Operation Chessman have operated from Malbork, Poland for 2 consecutive years. RAF Typhoons and Swedish Gripens flying side by side, testing interoperability and building the operational relationships that form the foundation of the emerging Northern European air defense architecture. The fighter designed for frozen roads is now patrolling the frozen north. The fighter, designed for $4 billion air bases, is having its engines delivered 155 days late. And the order book reflects the shift with unmistakable clarity. Sweden has ordered 60 Gripen E for its own air force. Brazil has 36 and conducted its first Meteor missile firing from a Gripen in November 2025, demonstrating that the Swedish-British weapons system works on another continent in a different hemisphere. For a different kind of air force. Colombia signed for 17 in a $3.1 billion deal in November 2025, choosing the Gripen over American, European, and Korean competitors. Thailand bought 4, and then there's Ukraine. In October 2025, Ukraine issued a letter of intent for up to 150 Gripen E, what would be the largest fighter order in Europe, larger than many NATO air forces. Ukraine doesn't need a stealth fighter that costs $33,000 an hour to fly and requires pristine air bases that Russian missiles would destroy in the first salvo. Ukraine needs a fighter that can fly from any road, rearm in 10 minutes, and carry the most lethal air-to-air missile available to Western forces. The Gripen was literally designed for Ukraine's exact operational requirements. A war of survival against a larger adversary fought from dispersed locations with no guarantee that any airbase would survive the next hour. If the Ukrainian order materializes, it would transform the Gripen from a Nordic niche product into one of the most widely deployed fighters in European defense. Canada, which is only 16. F-35 is on firm commitment out of a planned 88 jet purchase. Is reconsidering with Saab in active talks with Canadian industry about domestic production partnerships. Portugal is evaluating European alternatives. Saab's 2025 year-end report showed record order bookings, the highest in the company's history. Every Gripen order is an F-35 order that didn't happen, and the orders are accelerating. The Pentagon isn't watching this passively, it's scrambling. And the nature of the scramble reveals just how seriously Washington takes the threat. Senior defense officials have been dispatched to Nordic capital, Stockholm, Helsinki, Oslo, Copenhagen, and London, carrying the same message they've carried for 15 years. Block 4 is coming, TR-3 will be fixed, the F-35 will deliver. On its promises, stay in the program. The problem is that allies have heard this pitch for a decade and every promised timeline has been missed. Every cost estimate has been exceeded. The credibility of F-35 promises is at an all-time low. The Pentagon is applying particular pressure on Finland, NATO's newest member, which has 64 F-35s on order, not to deepen its partnership. With Sweden's Gripen program, similar pressure is being applied to Norway and Canada, but the pitch is getting harder to make. The F-35 will be great eventually is not a compelling argument when the Gripen is available today, proven in combat exercises, armed with the best air-to-air missile in NATO, and sitting on the tarmac. At a quarter of the cost. The Pentagon is also offering unprecedented pricing concessions, discounts on F-35 orders for wavering allies that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. Accelerated delivery timelines are being promised, though analysts are skeptical given ongoing block for delays, and the most revealing concession, enhanced technology transfer. More access to F-35 software code.